not come. Do not come.
Oh, pull it up, Jamie.
Before I get started, I want to mention that I contracted COVID-19 several months ago, back when we had developed vaccines, but it was the moral obligation of Americans to let the elderly and high-risk individuals take the vaccine first. I tested positive for the Delta variant, and over the course of a week, I encountered moderate muscle pains, a bad cough, a stuffy nose, a moderate fever of 102, and towards the end, placebo levels of shortness of breath. This, likely to the contrary of public opinion, was much more severe than I thought COVID-19 would be for me in particular. I expected to be less symptomatic than I was. After all, I'm a 20-year-old man with a strong immune system, yet I still had much worse symptoms than many of my less healthy peers, some of which were asymptomatic. This was surprising to me, since from the scientific literature I had encountered, the collective opinion suggested that young healthy people often didn't even get a fever, let alone make it to the shortness of breath stages of the disease. However, when I expressed my concerns to some of the close friends of mine, they were often surprised that I got so much better at the rate that I did, which baffled me even more. In order to stay concise, all I want to explain in this preface is that there is a surprising gap in what's portrayed in the media about COVID-19 and what is actually true and relevant regarding COVID-19. It seems no two cases are alike, and although pre-infection predictors are helpful in predicting how susceptible your body is to this disease, you cannot be certain to the degree in which your body can be ravaged by this disease, and therefore it is for everyone's benefit that you take both the virus and the info I'm presenting you seriously, lest you end up with this contemptible virus.
Without knowing precisely what the danger is, would you say it's time for our viewers to crack each other's heads open and feast on the goo inside?
Yes, I would, Kent.
When COVID-19 was first identified on December 31st, 2019, nobody even knew what type of pathogen it was. Over the course of about a week, we went from being completely oblivious of the nature of the disease to sequencing the entire genetic code of COVID-19 and discovering the genetics of COVID-19 were very similar to other coronaviruses found in southeastern China. Combine this with the fact that already hundreds of people in China were infected, and you now have the 7th species of coronavirus found to infect humans, only this time with a twist. This coronavirus in particular carries a unique S protein on its spike, which allows it to bind to ACE2 expression cells in humans. This S protein just so happens to be what is needed to effectively infect human cells. However unlucky it is, this unfortunate protein sequence is the main reason the virus is considered incredibly contagious. The problem with this analysis is that there seems to be no reason for the coronavirus to evolve with this protein in nature. On top of that, the closest related coronavirus found in the wild is only about 96% similar to COVID-19 and is found more than 2,000 miles from Wuhan, China. According to www.nature.com, investigations identified horseshoe bats as the natural reservoirs of SARS-related CoV and as the likely origin of SARS-CoV. In 2019, a novel CoV, SARS-CoV-2, causing respiratory illness was first reported in Wuhan, Hubei province, China. This emerging human virus is closely related to SARS-CoV and also appears to have originated in horseshoe bats, with its full genome 96% similar to a viral sequence reported from horseshoe bats. Now that we know that the horseshoe bats are the bats that are known to carry these similar types of coronaviruses, let's have a look at their habitat. The blue line is the line that carries a specific type of horseshoe bat that carries the most similar type of coronavirus, while the other lines are the other genuses of bats that have been shown to carry coronaviruses. As you can see, none of them have a habitat within a couple hundred miles of Wuhan, China. This is by no means conclusive evidence, may I add. It is very possible somebody was infected from the bat's territory and simply brought it to Wuhan, or maybe they just brought the bats with them. It's even possible that there are inaccuracies in the map, or in our understanding of where the bats live. However, all the caves near Wuhan have been examined, and no coronaviruses genetically similar to COVID-19 have been discovered.
You've gone from crazy like a fox to crazy like Fox News.
According to Fox News, in Shitu Cave south of Kunming, the capital of Yunnan, they found viruses in the bats' droppings and anal swabs that were more similar to human SARS than anything found in palm civets, the small animals that until then were presumed to be the source of human infection. Back in the laboratory, they found out that one of the viruses from the bat droppings, called WLV1, could thrive in monkey cells, specially engineered to activate the gene for the ACE2 receptors, the lock to which the coronavirus's spike protein can fit as a key. This would be strong evidence for the origin of COVID-19 if it wasn't for the fact that the city of Kunming was thousands of miles away from Wuhan. So now we have the fact that no remotely similar families of coronaviruses are native to Wuhan, and the closest similar coronavirus, which is just 96% similar and doesn't have the S protein, is thousands of miles away. So where do we think COVID-19 came from? Well, unfortunately, almost 2 years later, we still don't know, which might have to do a lot with China's reaction to the pandemic. Obviously, we can't blame China for this. They were just trying to prevent the virus from turning into a national disaster. But by locking down the area to researchers and travel, and by constant sanitation and destruction of that area of Wuhan, China has made it very difficult for researchers to acquire any evidence at all of the origin of COVID-19. With that being said, what we do know is that since the first SARS epidemic, the Wuhan Institute of Virology has amassed one of the largest libraries of coronaviruses in the world. Almost 19,000 samples are stored in its labs.
Joe feels very safe in a mask. I don't know, maybe he doesn't want to expose his face.
On January 31st, 2020, according to an email obtained by BuzzFeed, Christian Anderson, an infectious disease expert at Scripps Research in San Diego, wrote to Anthony Fauci and others that the genome of COVID-19 was inconsistent with expectations of evolutionary theory. Anderson noted that a really small part of the coronavirus's genome had unusual features. COVID-19 spike appeared to bind tightly to a human cell receptor known as ACE2, which we talked about a bit earlier. According to the New Yorker, there are 1,200 different mutations between the genomes of RATG13, the most similar coronavirus to COVID-19, and SARS-CoV-2. The numbers and distributions of these variations are too large for RATG13 to be the direct progenitor of SARS-CoV-2. The New Yorker went on to say, COVID-19 is the only virus known to possess a furin cleavage site in its section of the coronavirus family tree. We know that there are full-length bat coronaviruses similar to COVID-19 that can bind to human ACE2 but lack a furin cleavage site. The WIV, Wuhan Institute of Virology, was collecting many viruses each year. What if researchers had found one or even more of these similar coronaviruses with the same binding affinity for ACE2, and then swapped the furin cleavage site into a clone virus in the lab? Such work would have led directly to the creation of COVID-19. Of course, this is just speculation. This is by no means strong evidence that the coronavirus was genetically engineered, but if you add the fact that the WIV were proven to have been doing genetic research on coronaviruses in mice, and that the closest similar coronavirus is thousands of miles away from Wuhan, and that several evolutionary biologists, including Anderson, have pointed out that the genome of coronavirus is inconsistent with evolutionary theory, then the least we can do is investigate the matter further later in this video. But first, there are some other things we need to discuss.
Here's $5. Buy yourself a suit and get busy.
I'll buy a suit of drugs!
Before this segment, I want to preface this section with something. I have never before wanted to talk about horse dewormer, and the fact that I'm bringing it up now should be testament to how much I think it's worth bringing this up, despite my disdain for the topic. With that being said, ivermectin is not an approved treatment for COVID-19 by the FDA, and it has not been shown to be effective in doses legally prescribed to humans. However, in several clinical studies, very high doses of ivermectin have been shown to be ever so slightly more effective than placebo. In fact, ivermectin is on the WHO's list of essential medicines and is an FDA-approved treatment for several viruses, including the dengue virus, yellow fever, the syndibus virus, and Zika virus. More importantly, according to NCBI, ivermectin was shown to decrease the ability for COVID-19 to replicate by up to 50,000% inside of monkey kidneys. The problem with this study is that it used about 35 times the FDA-approved dose of ivermectin, which raises the question about its efficacy in humans. There is an ostensible medical basis for the public to use ivermectin, since it does have antiviral properties. Ivermectin has been prescribed over 100 million times in North American countries alone, and has been administered more than 4 billion times in the United States alone. So why is the FDA telling people to not ingest ivermectin, saying you are not a cow? Let me make this clear. You should not ingest ivermectin unless it's prescribed to you, obviously. And it has not yet been shown to be an effective treatment for COVID. However, well-established and esteemed government organizations, such as the FDA, should be reprimanded for depicting such blatant distortions of the truth. Frankly, this is propaganda to take advantage of the gawking masses and to try and encourage them to use more acceptable ways to manage this pandemic, such as mass vaccination. Which isn't exactly a bad thing, it's just the way they are doing it is ethically wrong. Whatever the motive for doing this is, just know the government thinks you are stupid, and you are proving them right. According to Verify.com, it is still too soon to see how effective ivermectin can be in treating COVID-19, but as of this moment, it seems to be relatively ineffective. Take a look.
The safety and efficacy of ivermectin for COVID-19 has not been established. A spokesperson with World Health Organization called the evidence so far inconclusive, and WHO recommends that the drug only be used to treat COVID-19 within clinical trials.
There's a chance there might be some modest effect that if you did a big enough trial, you could detect. But as a game changer, as a silver bullet, the evidence is looking fairly strongly that that's not going to be the case for this particular drug.
So what we know is ivermectin is not likely to be effective against COVID-19. But is it as dangerous as the media is saying?
But there's the truth and the truth.
Ivermectin's efficacy is unproven and likely insufficient for COVID-19. However, the way the media describes the issue might be considered more intense propaganda than fact. For example, take this article published by the Rolling Stones magazine. Gunshot victims left waiting as horse dewormer overdoses overwhelm Oklahoma hospitals, doctor says. Wow, what blatant abuse of an established news article. You can only write a headline like that so many times before your reputation sinks to Fox News levels of credibility. Where to even begin with this? According to NCBI, again, there have only been 459 ivermectin hospitalizations since the beginning of 2020. If we were to give a conservative estimate and say there were only 50 overdoses in Oklahoma, which is highly unlikely already, that would still be 50 overdoses stretched across 2 years for an entire state. On top of that, as stated before, ivermectin has been administered over 4 billion times in the United States alone since its invention in 1970, and the dose humans take is many times smaller than the dosage animals take per pound. I must stress that if you take large doses meant for animals over a large period of time, that you maybe deserve the side effects of an overdose. But the available scientific literature at this time shows that ivermectin is actually one of the safest drugs we have at our disposal for certain common viruses and parasites.
Fucking giant bear head clamped down on your dick and your asshole. And you're going, no! And that's how you die.
I'm sure most of you have seen this Joe Rogan clip where he tells the world he had COVID-19. I'm not going to show the whole clip, but I'm going to show the clip where he describes the treatments he was prescribed.
So we immediately threw the kitchen sink at it. All kinds of meds. Monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, Z-Pak, prednisone, everything.
Monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, Z-Pak. It seems as if his doctors realize there's no harm in throwing all these medications at him, and if they aren't going to make him worse, then why not? Joe Rogan was symptom-free in 5 days, most likely due to the monoclonal antibodies, but the fact still remains that his treatment worked very well. But the gawking rabble, including me, has been memeing non-stop about his dewormer. It just leaves you thinking, if his treatment worked so well, why is it being criticized so much? Well, I'll tell you why. The media, which in almost all cases is heavily sponsored in some way by the government or its agencies. Right now, the media just wants people to get vaccinated, which isn't unreasonable on paper, except for the fact that when you take a deeper look, you can find that these corporations that handle the vaccines are making billions and billions of dollars from the government to make and distribute these vaccines. I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing. However, when the media gets all its information from the government organizations that have been biased in the past, and have a reason to be biased in the present, it is our duty as a citizen to question this system. I'm not saying it's right or wrong that the media is pushing this narrative in this way, or that vaccination is the wrong way to go about doing this. All I'm saying is that we shouldn't necessarily blindly trust the media when its backers have reason to lie. To conclude this section, Joe Rogan taking ivermectin is fucking hilarious.
Fat broads and horse-faced lesbians.
I don't know how many times it's been said, nor how many times we need to say it in the future, but this two-party system has been letting us down lately. Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. There is not a single person my age that wants any of these people to be president. Donald Trump might be hilarious, but he also might be the worst president we've had since Nixon. Neither Trump nor Biden is the person we should have to lead us through these troubling times. It's just not right. How is somebody who's barely sentient going to make the right call and informatively guide the public through this tragedy? How is Donald Trump going to do anything without saying something so stupid that it's impossible to take him seriously? We need a better system, and fast. There's been this video going around of Joe Biden coughing into his hand after a speech with no mask on, and then walking around and then shaking multiple high-ranking officials' hands. Now, I'm sure Biden's been vaccinated, however, this is just more evidence that we need a better leader. The president should be leading by example, and the fact that the president is not wearing a mask and is coughing into his hand is just unforgivable, but I've come to expect it at this point. While we are on the topic of government leaders, this is Anthony Fauci, the leader of the National Institute of Health. I'm going to talk about this bag of sunshine for a little bit, but first I want to talk about why you shouldn't want to follow this man for advice. First of all, we know he has knowingly lied about COVID several times, sometimes for the good of the people, and sometimes for the good of himself. However, I think you could make the argument that any lying for the people is not actually good for the people. But let me give you some examples first. First of all, there's this video of Anthony Fauci saying that it doesn't appear that masks will have any effect on COVID-19. Ostensibly, he said this was so hospital officials could retain a sufficient supply of masks for their personal use. But even if this is true, it's still immoral that somebody of this position should lie about something as crucial to public health as masks. Fauci has also admitted that he intentionally overestimated the proportion of the population that needed to be vaccinated for effective herd immunity. He lied about this for a seemingly noble reason. He simply wanted more people to get vaccinated. On surface level, this doesn't seem to be a bad thing, but the fact that he is willing to set the precedent that it's okay to lie to the public about something as important as COVID vaccinations for any reason at all is reprehensible and corrupt. One final thing that Fauci was shown to lie about, and this is the bigger deal, is that he lied about sponsoring the WIV, the same institute that was shown to plausibly be a possible source of COVID-19. Fauci sponsored the WIV to perform gain-of-function research on coronaviruses on mice. He lied about it to Congress and was proven to be a lie when several independent papers coming from the WIV were shown to have Fauci as a sponsor. Now, what does gain-of-function mean exactly? Gain-of-function, put simply, is the act of genetically engineering pathogens to infect a different animal than it could infect before. Coronaviruses could not infect mice. Then they were genetically engineered to be able to infect mice. This is dangerous for several reasons. First of all, the US government realized it was a bad idea to sponsor gain-of-function research in China, because why would you trust China if you're America? Not a good idea. But on top of that, gain-of-function research is not something you should mess around with anyways, especially with potential life-ending viruses that have already harmed humans in the past, like coronaviruses. Now, right now, all we know for sure is that gain-of-function research was sponsored by Fauci in Wuhan on coronaviruses, which is by no means conclusive evidence of anything. But if you add the fact that the bats carrying coronaviruses aren't native to Wuhan, the closest similar coronavirus is only about 96% similar and was found 2,000 miles away, COVID-19 has no evolutionary reason to develop its S protein or its furin cleavage site, and that China actively prevented the foreign researchers from traveling to Wuhan to try and identify the cause, well, in that case, you have a good case for what's known as the lab leak hypothesis.
You ready for some autism?
I just want to preface this section by saying, it is my opinion that almost everybody should get vaccinated, because almost everybody is at risk. What I mean by at risk is, say, older than 30. 30 is kind of arbitrary, and your risk isn't even that high, but I'll just say 30 because I need to say something. Then if you have diabetes or heart disease, you're at risk, and if you're overweight or have any autoimmune disease like lupus or HIV, or if you take steroids for any reason, then you're at risk. So, the majority of America falls into one of these categories. Maybe something like 90%, but definitely the majority is either older than 30 or obese. According to the CDC, around 3,000 people younger than 30 have died from COVID-19, and only about 5% of those people were considered to be previously healthy. That means in the past year, in America, only 150 healthy people below the age of 30 have died from COVID. Of course, there isn't really any risk you should take when it comes to your health, and this data doesn't account for other negative outcomes, such as encephalopathy, lung damage, and so forth. However, of the hundreds of thousands of healthy people under the age of 30, only 150 died, which isn't a lot. In fact, it might be considered so trivial that taking intense precautions like inoculation of vaccines that haven't been extensively researched might not seem worth it. I want to talk about this as well. This is the first time that mRNA vaccines have been utilized, and although technology is super interesting to somebody like me that studies biology, the technology is very new. Around 1,300 FDA-approved pharmaceuticals are recalled every year, and many of them give people chronic syndromes many years after they've been taken. This is a potential reason you might not want to give low-risk young people the vaccine, because they are the ones that could experience the longest possible side effects of a relatively untested vaccine. However, there's a much stronger case to be made actually. I recently watched several videos by a man named Geert Vanden Bossche, who is a vaccinologist and earned his degree in virology, which happens to be the two things that are crucial to our understanding of the COVID-19 vaccine. His main argument is that through mass vaccination into an active pandemic with vaccines that do not provide full sterilizing immunity, that the genome of COVID-19 will vary and new variants will be created, essentially saying that vaccines are causing the variants. His exact words are, "We are creating an immense evolutionary pressure to cause a spike protein to change so that antibodies and other immune cell recognition mechanisms that are trained by the vaccines are incapable of finding the pathogens when it enters the body. This is what causes these breakthrough cases. When the pathogen changes, this is more likely. If you vaccinate into an active pandemic, what you get is an evolutionary pressure for a radiation of variants. This variance in the virus is what causes the vaccine to be less and less effective, which is what you're seeing in real life with all the new variants." Now, it is true that the Delta variant came out before mass vaccination. However, before February 2021, there were only 6 COVID variants. Now, as of October 2021, there are at least 14 more that we know of, meaning there are at least 20 COVID variants as of right now. Now, Geert Vanden Bosche's theory hasn't been proved. However, we did start vaccinating around February, and there have been 14 new variants in just 7 months. Geert's model makes perfect evolutionary sense, and what's more scary is that as vaccination rates go up, the more variation there will be in the COVID-19 genome and the less effective the vaccines will be. When somebody comes up with a theory so early into the pandemic and then is right about it, it is incumbent upon the scientific community to observe whether or not his thesis has merit. However, nobody takes arguments that go against the groupthink seriously, and to me it's ridiculous to imagine any media source spreading his viewpoint, even Fox News, which is really saying something. Even though it's a bad thing by all standards, a vaccine expert has made a rational point about vaccinating into a pandemic, and the data suggests that his statements have merit. It is our moral duty to investigate the possibility that these vaccines are causing these new variants, which it certainly appears that they are. With that being said, this will never happen. The vaccines are making too many people too much money, and that money is going straight to new sites and mayors and congressmen. Nothing is going to be changed. It's my personal belief that the only way we can fully eradicate this virus is with a vaccine with full sterilizing immunity, and with the exponential rates of COVID variants, that seems less and less likely. After all, there's a reason why measles went away and the flu didn't. Incredibly, after vaccination and BMI, your level of vitamin D is the third best indicator we have that can help predict the chances of somebody having a negative outcome to COVID-19. Vaccination is the most important predictor, but vitamin D levels and BMI are also very good predictors. Yet the media doesn't say anything about that. Nobody's telling you to exercise and eat right, nor is anybody telling you that vitamin D is one of the best predictors of COVID-19. All the media talks about is vaccines, because it's what makes the pharmacies money.
As attacks on me, quite frankly, are attacks on science. You're really attacking not only Dr. Anthony Fauci, you're attacking science.
So far, we know that the Wuhan Institute of Virology obviously resides in Wuhan, and that they have acquired more than 19,000 unique coronaviruses. We also know that the bat that carries the majority of coronaviruses, the horseshoe bat, doesn't live within 200 miles within Wuhan. We know that the most similar type of coronavirus ever found is only about 96% similar to COVID-19, and it resides around 2,000 miles away in Southeastern Asia. We know that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was studying gain-of-function research on coronaviruses for mice and monkeys, and we know that the American NIH, led by Fauci, sponsored that very same gain-of-function research in Wuhan and then lied about it to Congress. We know that COVID-19 has a unique S protein and furin cleavage site that makes it hypercontagious to humans, and is very unlikely to evolve naturally. We have several evolutionary biologists saying that the genome for COVID-19 is not something that is likely to evolve naturally, and we have the fact that China has done what many people will consider a cover-up by not letting international researchers come investigate a large section of Wuhan during and after the COVID-19 outbreak. And finally, the last piece of evidence, it has come out that 3 workers in the Wuhan Institute of Virology were shown to be hospitalized with seasonal illnesses. Now, I don't know about you, but how many times have you been hospitalized with seasonal illnesses? Either way, this is extremely concerning to me that all this evidence points to the origin of COVID-19 being from a lab, and even if it didn't come from a lab, it would be extremely unfortunate that the Wuhan Institute of Virology happens to be located exactly where the outbreak took place, and also happens to be very far from any remotely similar coronaviruses. All I want to say is this: we need to make it clear that our lives matter more than the government, or the media, or the pharmacies, and that these government-funded organizations can only make so many fatal blunders before American citizens lose whatever remaining trust they might have in this system. I spent about 4 weeks researching articles trying to find unbiased sources looking at professionals for their opinions. I understand the available research inside and out, and all my sources are linked below. Anyways, please tell me what you think in the comments, and try to stay safe and wear a goddamn mask for fuck's sake. Bye everyone.
Oh, and he said some bad words. He said the N-word.
I don't speak Spanish! Yeah!
3 simple words. I am gay.
Do not come.
Death to all of them.
I thought I told you to trim those sideburns! Go home! You're off the team for good!
So Joseph Rosenbaum died as he had lived, trying to touch an unwilling minor.